And I think given the year we've all had, it's just a wonderful opportunity for us to gather together to talk about how we can create some special memories in a really difficult year. By, we need to acknowledge that, but also acknowledge that it's almost Christmas. It is a time that is so full of meaning for us and so full of opportunities to connect and to have joy in our families and with our friends. So I'm hoping that this next hour will be one where you feel inspired, and maybe you'll feel a new sense of hope. Maybe you'll feel like, you're ready to really embrace this after kind of perhaps slogging through a bit of a difficult year. So welcome. And I want to welcome the three authors whose work we're going to feature tonight, Glenys Nellist, Tracy Smith, and Matthew Paul Turner. And before I give you little brief bios of them, although you probably know their work, I did ask each of them to give me sort of a quirky, fun fact about them. And so after I introduce them, they need to claim which one is them. Although, sorry, Matthew, you're alphabetically going last, so everyone will know which is your fun fact. But anyway, okay. The three facts are this. One of these three wonderful authors does something that sort of creeps me out, which is this person collects clowns. So that's one of the fun facts. Another one is one of these people, to raise money for college as a child, sold eggs, kept chickens and sold eggs to the people in their church, and actually raised $6,000 for a college fund. It's very impressive. And another person that we'll hear from actually had a gerbil who was taught to do a trick when this person was in high school. So I'm going to give you some brief bios, and then after I introduce you, you need to claim your weird fun fact. And I'm glad I didn't have to give one. I couldn't think of anything anyway. I guess I'm
a lie.
Yeah.
One.
So starting with Glenys. Glenys was born and raised in a little village in northern England. She's the author of many wonderful children's books, which I trust that you all know, including the best-selling 'Twas the Evening Before Christmas, The Wonder That Is You, and several others. Her writing reflects a real passion for helping children discover joy in the world. And Glenys lives in Michigan with her husband, David. So Glenys, claim your fun fact, and welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm excited to be here. Well, I was the one who had a pet gerbil. I don't know if it was a he or a she, but I taught it to jump onto my head. It was so cool. I don't know how, but I would hold it like this, and then I would count. It wouldn't jump before I got to 3, and I would say 1, 2, 3, go, and it would jump on my head. It was the cutest thing. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Nothing, and I don't think any of us could have guessed that about you. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
So next we have Tracy. And Tracy Smith is an ordained minister. She's the mother of 3. She's an author. Her passion is helping families find times for connection and spiritual nourishment among the hustle and bustle of daily life. And what began as a quest in her own family has provided valuable insight for thousands of others. And she believes, and really lives this out, that faith practices should be fun, really easy to fit into daily life, and accessible to all, regardless of the person's age, their background, their theological training, and so on. So Tracy, welcome, and I'm so happy to be talking about your new book tonight as well.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's such a delight to be here talking with some great colleagues and friends, and so happy to have you moderating this discussion. So my fact, I must have sent it in a hurry because I actually don't have a clown collection anymore, but I did as a kid. So my dad, growing up, was a 3rd grade elementary school teacher, and he told me that it's really common. He told me as an adult that it's really common for kids about that age. That's when they start getting collections. And that was true for me. And somebody in my class had a collection of something, and I said I wanted a collection. So I started collecting clowns, and I had all kinds of them, like little stuffed ones and tons of them. And it wasn't until like very recently, like in the last 5 years, that I learned or realized that lots of people hate clowns and think they're very creepy and scary. And that was never, I always loved them and thought they were just fun and cute. So I gave away my collection long, long ago. I wish I still had them, but that's my weird fact.
We also think people who like clowns are creepy. So I mean,
Children's authors that write clowns.
love
My next.
Well, I'm so happy that we'll be talking about your new book though as well. And lastly, and of course, last but not least, I want to welcome Matthew Paul Turner. And Matthew is the best-selling author of many books, including When God Made You and When I Pray for You. He's also a photographer. He is an author and he's a speaker. He's the father of 3 young children and has a wonderful new book that we'll be talking about tonight. So I guess everyone has guessed, you know, why don't you tell us your story about the twins?
Yeah, no, when I was like 7 or 8, my father wanted to teach me the value of money. And so he bought me 12 chickens, which over a couple of years grew to about 100. And I took care of them and, you know, collected the eggs, cleaned out the coops, and then I would clean the eggs and sell them at church. And yeah, no, I raised a good amount of money doing that. So yeah, we also had bees and I sold honey too. So, but.
Do you have a poop emoji on your Christmas tree behind you?
Yes, wait a second. Oh yeah, I do. That is my son Ezra's. We all got to choose an ornament, and he chose the poop emoji. I was actually trying to cover that up at first.
Well,
Oops. Sorry, hold on. I'm sorry, I got you muted, Jen.
That's all right. That's all right. I was just going to say that brings us to the topic at hand, which is ways that we can celebrate and connect with our kids. And obviously one way is to let them help decorate and to allow them to choose the things that they love, which I think is great. But let's start. I wanted to share first Glenys's new book. And one of the things I want to do is just with each of these books, just talk about a place in the book that really meant something to me, and ask each author to talk about a part of the book that means something in particular to them. Either maybe it resonates with a childhood experience they've had, or an experience as a parent, or maybe it's just a new insight that you have. But Glenys's book is called Little Mole's Christmas Gift. And this book, it's hard to describe without, I wish all of you were holding it, but the way that the illustrations are really integrated with the story, and the way that the illustrator has really understood, I think, the tone and the message behind this book, which is about kindness, makes it a really moving book. And you can almost, there's a storm coming and these little animals in the forest are trying to weather it. And I kept thinking as I was reading it, even again today, that I think it'll resonate with kids on kind of a deep level, like on a more psychological level, in that they see around them people struggling. They pass people on the street who are homeless or hungry. And I think that this, in a really gentle way, it won't traumatize a child to read this book, but it will resonate with their experience of seeing people in need and having that feeling that I think we can all remember having as children, of thinking, well, here's another person right here who's suffering. How can I connect with that person? What's my responsibility? Do I have a responsibility to that person? And so this really sweet book has this little mole going through the forest and giving of a gift that he has. And at the end of the story, he has less to give to his parent, but has given it and shared this gift. And it was hard for me to find a favorite spread in this. I don't know, I just love all the little creatures, but I guess what I would say, the thing I like best in terms of the way that the illustrator worked with it, is that it almost creates like a feeling like you're walking through the woods. I mean, there's like a chilliness, and there's icy rain described, and snow, and the illustrator just did a really beautiful job of capturing that. And, you know, as we know, as children's authors, your illustrator is really helping to interpret and coordinate and communicate the story, and yours did a beautiful job in this. So I'm so glad you had such a great partner in that way. Do you want to talk about your favorite spread in this book?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for making my book sound so good.
It is so good. It is so good.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Beaming Books, who are the publishers, and definitely to Sally Garland, the wonderful illustrator. She's British too, so, you know, it's, you know, she has to be good. But I'll show you my favorite spread. So if you haven't read the book, if you haven't seen it, it's really a simple story of kindness and generosity. And I'm just going to walk you through the first like 4 spreads, my favorite one. So here's, I hope you can, wait, I have to figure out the best way, yeah. Here's little Mole in his burrow, and he's super excited because he's found this massive mushroom for Mama for it's growing in the woods, and so he's on a mission to go and get it. And so he scurries off through the snow, and here's the massive mushroom. And so he runs over. And, you know, the reason he's excited is because it's a big gift, right? And I think we can all identify with that. You know, we all take time to choose a special gift, and, you know, we anticipate what it's going to be like when our loved one receives that gift, don't we? So anyway, here he is trying to topple the mushroom, eventually succeeds. I love that illustration with his little hat flying off. And so all is great. And he's on his way back to the burrow, dragging this mushroom that is actually as big as him. And so this is my favorite spread in the book. Because here he is, as I talked about just before, he's sort of imagining what this mushroom is going to look like when it's wrapped up. You know, he's going to put a huge bow on it, and he's going to give it to Mama, and she'll be thrilled with his big gift, you know. And I guess that is my favorite spread because, you know, as the author, you write the words and you never quite know how your illustrator is going to illustrate them. And I just really loved this because I just think we can all resonate with it. But anyway, as Jen mentioned, as he's on his way back to the burrow, little Mole, he encounters different creatures in need. The first one is little Squirrel. And so I won't show you anymore, but our little Mole has a big decision to make. Should he share his mushroom or should he save it for Mama? And so in the end, he discovers that, well, his mushroom isn't big anymore. It ends up a little piece, but it's the best gift for Mama that she could ever have. His kindness is. And so that's a little synopsis, and that's my favorite spread in the book.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think it will, there's so many elements where a young child will relate to this story, and including what you were saying about having a gift that you want to give. And I love that, you know, the basis of this whole book is about his love for his mother and his desire to please her. And again, that sort of names and acknowledges the experience of little kids the age that will be reading this book. So thank you. And I hope that everyone will check this out. It's also sort of a sequel to Glenys's first book, Little Mole Finds Hope, which is also incredibly timely right now. So thank you, Glenys.
You're welcome.
All right, well, I will move on then to our next author. I'm trying to, you know, make sure we get to every element of this, but Faithful Families for Advent and Christmas is Tracy Smith's new book. And this book is a book that is so full of helpful information. Had I had this when I had 4 little kids at home, I would have probably, you know, earmarked it and torn out pages, which is something I want to talk to you about, Tracy, actually. But it basically is a book that families can use both to kind of center their practices and their rituals that they practice together as a family, but also to get some new ideas. And one of the things that I loved most about this are the discussion questions. And it's obvious to me, Tracy, that both you work with children and that you have children, because the questions as they're posed in this book are not going to be over someone's head, and yet they also honor a child's intelligence. It's not, you know, baby questions, but these are questions that could really engage children's imaginations and their curiosity about spiritual things. And so it was hard for me to pick a favorite, but I really love in the reflecting on Advent virtues or values, the page about Advent hope and some of the practices that you suggest that families can do together, as well as just this discussion questions. But I love the idea in this. You have the practical idea, and I think another gift that you have is that you address children who have all different types of intelligence. You know, as we know, there's 9 types of intelligence, and some kids respond more visually, some kids respond verbally, some kids need tactile things. And your books always address and acknowledge and give practices for kids regardless of what kind of intelligence they have innately. So in this one, you talked about Advent hope and the idea of planting some seeds or planting a garden, and talking about hope and about waiting in the context of growing plants from seeds. And I just loved that. And again, like I could picture a child who maybe the kind of concept of hope or the concept of Advent would be difficult to understand at their age or their level. But to say, what happens when we plant a seed, you know, and what, you know, we have to wait for it, we have to care for it, and then we get to see it bloom. And so anyway, I just love this book, and I thank you for writing it. And I would love to hear what you loved, you know, what's your favorite part, or where did you most resonate with it? Were there any practices that, you know, you've done so many times as a family that you almost forgot to put in? Tell us about this book.
Well, thank you again so much, Jennifer, and to everybody. I could listen to you talk all day, Glenys. Couldn't you just listen to Glenys talk? Like, just tell my kids a story, please. Call you up for story time every Friday night. So this book it's very special to me. And as I was kind of saying to you all before we started recording, it's very personal to me. One of the weird things about the production of this book is that it was pretty quick as book production goes. And so I was actually writing this book in part of it in the pandemic. And so I went through kind of a dark time where I was writing it and just sort of thinking, well, what is Christmas even going to be like this year? And this book is already kind of out in the world and it's supposed to be done. And feeling like, what is it going to be like? And in the end, I feel like it made it a better book. But at the time, it was just felt so heavy to be thinking about what does it mean to celebrate Christmas as a family when we're all, it was during that time of very intense, the very beginning shelter in place time. And so, you know, that's one of the things that's very dear to me. And then some of the practices that are some of the most simple ones, you know, I feel like my job is not so much to make up or invent things as much as it is to curate and to pull things. There's so many ideas that have come from other children's ministers and talks like this that are kind of back and forth where people will share ideas. So I do feel like it's kind of a collective book where a lot of people have contributed to it and offered ideas. And one example of that is, I don't know who originally told me this idea, but I heard this idea of taking an ornament off of your tree and telling a story about it. And I think that would be such a great idea to do this Christmas, because you could do it over Zoom, right? If you have to get together with your extended family, you could say, hey, you know, everybody grab an ornament and just tell a story about it. And then I think one other tiny little thing I would say that's dear to me about every book every Faithful Families book I've written so far has had a chapter for difficult times. And those chapters are always very important to me, whether it's separation or divorce or for when family is far away. You know, I had sketched out for when family is far away before the pandemic, and then thinking about, wow, that's going to be really relevant this year. So in a strange way, those practices for difficult times are really dear to me in all my books, because I know that that's when families sometimes need them the most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want to say too, and I know that at different points in my life as a mom raising kids, you know, when I had aspirations about taking on new practices, or, you know, really wanted to invest in, you know, making a richer experience for my kids, sometimes it would feel like I would feel like, oh no, what if I don't do it right? Or what if I, you know, what if I start this practice and I don't keep up on it? Or what if the kids don't like it? And, you know, what if it just dead ends? And well, then, you know, then you have that fear of sort of failure. And one of the things I want to say to people listening is that one of the wonderful things about Tracy is that she is a real mom and a real person who works with children. So these things are not meant to be perfect. They're not like Pinterest worthy, whatever. They're things that you can use, adapt. You can try it for a week and decide that that's not for you, or do different things with different aged kids. But tell about a time that you've actually torn pages out of one of your own books.
You know all my stories. So yes, Jennifer and I are friends, and she knows that one of the things that I struggle with, and I think I'd be curious to know if Matthew and Glenys, if you feel this too sometimes, feels like if you are writing about these things, like you better have it right, like you better be like the example. And I've felt at times like I don't want to be that person that writes about faith practice for kids, and then my own kids are suffering in that way. It gets me choked up to even think about it. So I wrote this beautiful book of prayers. I think I say that because my kids helped me write them. Like, they're very dear and important, but we weren't using them. And so because I have multiple copies of my own book, as we do, one day I just cut it apart and put the prayers on the walls of the house. And it just felt freeing. Like, okay, at least they'll be here. At least we'll see them. And I mentioned it to my oldest son. I said, did you notice that I put up the prayers? And he said, yeah, you should have put one in the bathroom downstairs because there's lots of spiders in there. And, a sweet moment of connection. But
That's awesome.
Me.
Well, thank you. And now I would love to talk about Matthew Paul Turner's new book, All the Colors of Christmas, which is such a beautiful book, and I hope all of you are familiar with it. And this book, I feel like I'm starting to get, you know, you start reading enough of someone's work and you kind of start to understand who they are as an artist and as a creator. And I think with this book, and I've read your previous books, I started kind of getting it. Like I get what gifts are very particular to you that you bring to as a children's author. And it was this kind of moment of epiphany, I guess, for me. With this book, I thought, oh, he's allowing for the grand spiritual ideas and the things that a child can touch and feel and understand to coexist, you know, and not to, you know, you're not trying to create like a lofty prayer that a child is supposed to memorize and the parent can feel really good about having exposed them to this, you know, thing. You're really opening doors for kids at different moments in their life and different ways they experience life to really grab hold of some ideas and their own experience. And the spread in this book, and I don't know, I hope that made sense, but the spread in this book that really moved me in that way was, I think it's the second page of the one that's Christmas is White. And you describe Christmas as being, or white as being the holiest of nights. But then you also on the same spread have paper snowflakes and powdered cakes and, you know, frosty exhales. And I thought, oh, again, like you're addressing all the senses of a child, the sense of taste and touch and smell. You're also kind of slipping in this grand and more spiritually deep idea. Why is it the holiest of nights? And I just love that. I was really moved by that. And I also really I love all the illustrations in this book, but for some reason, this one really captured me. And it almost is like when you see, I don't know, people gathering around Rockefeller Center, the big tree,
Yeah.
you know, it has that kind of panoramic, joyful community feel. And I love that. So, so I'd love to hear, like, what is your favorite spread, or like, how did you approach writing this book? And also, like, in some ways, like, everything we write is sort of spiritual autobiography. In what way do you see this book as are there elements of that for you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for all those nice things that you said about my book. And Tracy, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I am honored because so many, I mean, all of you are such beautiful storytellers, and your works have all touched me. I mean, Glenys is one of the most incredible children's writers I've ever encountered, just from her ability to go from a rhyming text and also tell this really rich, beautiful story. And Jennifer, like, your books are like, y'all are just really, really a very big honor to be here. All the Colors of Christmas was the first book that my publisher actually asked me to write. All the other ones that I sort of was inspired, or I came up with the idea and I presented it to them, and they just asked if I'd be interested in writing a book for Christmas. And at first I wasn't into the idea because I hadn't thought of an idea for it at first, and I didn't want to just force something. And I told my editor that I would think about it, and I would see if I could come up with something that felt like it was going to be me. And so eventually I wanted, when I went into this concept, I just wanted to connect. I wanted to write a book that connected all the dots of what I love and remember about Christmas. Like, what I loved about the holiday is that somewhere around the middle of November, I would start to get this feeling. I would start to smell things. I would start to, like, have this hope of excitement. And it wasn't just the thrill of getting gifts. It was I grew up in a really conservative, kind of an awful church at times, but at Christmas time, it was beautiful. Like, there was something beautiful about the idea of the leading up to Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and the Christmas Eve service. And I also loved Christmas movies. I mean, I loved watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas the very first time. And I loved watching, you know, A White Christmas on the day after Thanksgiving. And so I really wanted to capture that. And I came up with this idea for doing that with the idea of color. And so I started to think about all the colors that I would think about at the holiday. And I guess to shorten because I ramble, I would say that when I realized that when I made up the idea for the last set of the last color, which is the color you, and that's when the whole book made sense for me. So when I write, you know, Christmas is you, it's your own unique hue, and started to go into this idea of Christmas becoming who that kid is, and how that kid relates to the world, and how that kid sees things and feels things. It felt complete. And so and it felt like a representation of the incarnation. And so of making God human in us and alive in us. And so that's what I hoped to do with this book. But you expressed it way more beautifully. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't often write having this grandiose concept. I really just try to connect with what is going on in my world or what's going on in my kids' world, and kind of bring it down and try to come up with an idea that might relate to other people. And so yeah, this is all the colors of Christmas. So.
I remember hearing you speak a few months ago at the children's conference that we both spoke at, and one of the things you said in your keynote really moved me, which was you advised people who were writing for children to really make sure that they were connecting with their own experience. And I think that might seem to people who aren't doing this work, obvious, like, of course you're going to do that. But I think a lot of times when people approach a new idea for children, they either kind of get in a nostalgic space about what children are like, kind of in the abstract, or they try to recreate a story that they really loved when they were a kid. But I think the way that you approach your work by remembering, how you felt as a kid, and it's November and the Christmas movies start going on and you start smelling certain things and your church starts feeling a different way. I think that inroad to your books is part of the reason why they are best-selling books, because you're connecting so deeply with something in you, which then of course opens the door for children to connect with who they are. And I know you're not trying to approach your work with like an overview or like a mission statement or something like that, but in a way, all of these books do feature, the word you.
Yeah.
Really connecting with your young readers. Have you ever given more thought to that, or do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. My therapist and I have had lots of conversations about it. So I think that it's. I would have said when I started writing children's books, I really thought that I was focusing on my kids and giving them something different and unique that was more positive and more like, I wanted to rewrite the story of God and break the cycle of what I was taught and give them something different, something new, something fresh. And so that's, I guess, how it started. But it was at some point during the middle of When God Made You, writing it, because it was my second book that I wrote. I realized that I was writing for myself as much. Like there's a part in When God Made You where it's, so be you, fully you, a show-stopping review. Live your life in full color, every tint, every hue. Discover, explore, have faith, but love more, and learn and relearn all that God made you for. And I was in the parking lot of a grocery store when I wrote that. And I just remembered like weeping and knowing that was as much for me as it was for my kids, and hope and thinking about other people's kids, and thinking about other people's stories, and because I never heard anything remotely close to that as a kid. I sometimes I wondered if God even liked us. And so to celebrate God in a way that is also a celebration of you and who you are and what you're able to bring and what you're good at, that God celebrates that. That's a message I wish I'd heard. And I am happy that my kids have heard it and that other people's kids can hear it too.
Yeah, and you keep repeating it in different ways and really creative, imaginative ways in these different books, and so again, children hear and learn differently, and this book might reach a child in a different way who's really, sensitive to color and sensitive to art and looking at the world through its colors instead of in a different way. So I appreciate that so much.
And can we just mention Jillian Gamble for 1 second, because what she brought, like she's the illustrator, and her gift of just capturing. So one of the reviews on Amazon is that this book makes you feel Christmas, and that's a lot of what she brought to this book. Like there's a new and yet a classic feel to it, and so it's just she created a beautiful, colorful, diverse representation. It's always a thrill to work with her.
It's awesome. Have you worked with her before? Has she illustrated?
When God Made the World was illustrated by her. Yeah.
Yeah, it does have such a great feel. And again, as we're talking about different ways that kids learn and experience the world, this does also have this tactile thing on the cover of it. The title is in kind of a glitter.
Yeah. We fought hard for that. So yeah.
It was worth it. I'm so glad that they did that for you. Well, thank you, Matthew. I'm so excited about this book, and I love the message that you're bringing to kids, and the inclusive and also just celebratory message of God's love for them. And it's a beautiful story to hear that you feel like you're giving healing messages that you didn't receive as a kid, but now you're spreading that. And I think to some degree, everyone who writes is doing that, right? We want to do that in our different ways, but I think you do it just so beautifully. Well, I had a couple other general questions, and then I do want to let us, in 5 or so minutes, we can start taking questions. And I think Deborah's keeping track of if anyone's asking questions in the comments. But if anyone listening has a question or a comment that you want to share, we'll do that in a couple of minutes. You can just put it in the chat box. I wanted to return to sort of the time that we find ourselves in, and this is for any of you, or maybe all 3 of you would like to answer this, but this time of uncertainty, and this year that has held so many surprises and challenges and revelations and reckonings and stress and all the things that adults are going through. I'd love to hear, and Tracy, you touched on this a little bit in terms of writing your new book during this time, but how creatively are you dealing with that, whether or not it's creating a new book for children or a new work, but just in terms of your artistic selves as people who create and who use words to create, are you, I know some writers that I know feel really blocked right now. Others have taken this opportunity of things being a little slower and different to take artistic risks and to try new things. I would just love to hear, just subjectively for each of you, just even too, like how you see yourself moving forward as an artist after this year and as a writer. So I don't know if anybody wants to start, but.
Bring in the deep questions, Jennifer. I mean, I can't go first on that one. I was going to give suggestions for how to use Glenys and Matthew's books to help people get through the pandemic, but gosh, I think what you just said about maybe the pandemic really reorienting all of us into what's important and what's not. Promoting a book and trying to sell a book will get really old really quickly to just try to sell a book. But if you're trying to make a difference in the world, then you have something different to say, right? And so the thing I wanted to say about Matthew's book, which I've been thinking about, I can't stop thinking about it, is that during this pandemic, I've been taking a walk with my kids a lot. Like everybody's going on a walk, right? And one of the things that we've been doing is a rainbow walk, where you walk and try to find things of different colors. And it's like a meditative practice. And the rule I always gave them was that it had to be something in nature, so you couldn't pick like a stop sign or whatever. And so to look for the things in the rainbow of colors in nature was just really centering for them. And I was thinking about that with Matthew's book, like how you could take it and make it a meditation for them. And I feel that way about Glenys's book too, in terms of this present, right? My kids, I think one of the ways they're handling their anxiety is to talk about all the things they want for Christmas and they want Santa to bring. But what if they took Little Mole's idea about giving and made a list of the things that they could give? So I think that it kind of ties into your question about how do we orient our lives during the pandemic. I think for me, I'm just over it when it comes to self-promotion or selling things or caring if people buy my book. I don't care. I want people
It doesn't help us. It doesn't help during a pandemic anyway. I mean,
Right. Yes.
we're all like flying by the
Everybody's just over everything, but it does. I think it just makes you feel like, what is important and what do I care about and what do I just simply do not care about. So that's me.
What, did we lose somebody? I have to admit, Jennifer, I was only half paying attention to you when you were reading that, talking about that question. I was reading comments, and so I think I have I have the idea, but I think that because we don't have all the things that or many of us don't have those things. Like we don't have church, we don't have all of the stuff that we would normally be doing in regards to making our holiday spiritual. I think it gives us an opportunity to be creative in how we're spiritualizing our holiday, that we can look for unique opportunities to give to our kids a moment where something that matters, bringing that up to them, making that visible to them, helping them see it. It also just it takes away the pressure, because it's like, I think as parents, we're sometimes so focused on our kids, wanting our kids to connect with the Jesus story and wanting our kids to connect, to be more about giving than the receiving. My kids got the receiving down real good. I mean, so it's all the rest of it that sometimes they miss. And it's, so this sort of takes the pressure off of us to let kids be kids and let them enjoy it. And is God found, is the story of Jesus found in the idea of just letting them be and letting them do and experience it as they feel led to experience it, and celebrating that instead of looking for ways to try to gear it towards something or take it away from something. And I think that's I think all of us in our attempts to just not be so particular about things, there's an opportunity for Christmas to become less about what we think it's supposed to be about, and let it be what it's about.
I love that. And kind of, I mean, that lack of control, you're talking about not trying to guide them and tell them exactly what experience to have. We can always learn from them too. And in this time where we're letting, maybe if we let kids, if you've got young kids at home and you let them sort of drive the car in terms of how you're going to celebrate, and see what connects with them and see what we can learn from them, see what insights or what ideas that they have. I think that's a great thing to share. But Glenys, did you want to approach these questions? Let's see here. Here you are.
There we go. Well, I love, I think Matthew said it, that this whole pandemic, it's just forced everyone to find creative ways to stay in touch. But what I was also thinking about is, I lead a Tuesday morning Bible study group with a bunch of ladies from church via Zoom, obviously. We're studying Disciple, and it's we're plowing our way through the Old Testament. It is hard work, because that book is just full of a God I don't get, I don't understand. Stories like, this is crazy stuff, you know. But in between, I'm finding God in all the mess, in all the cracks. And I just feel like this pandemic, you have to look for those silver linings and find God in the mess, because God is right there. Sometimes hiding in the cracks, you know, like little Mo finds hope where hope is sometimes hiding in the dark. I just think it's given me anyway an opportunity to see God all around, in little ways, really, like in the gorgeous trees, you know. I don't know, the trees have been phenomenal this fall, but I feel like the whole pandemic, it's just made us really appreciate the small things and the beauty of the world and families, and that God is everywhere in all the mess. God is to be found in the cracks.
So Glenys, there was a question I wanted to make sure to ask you before we end, and we have at least 10 minutes, but you know, Little Mole Finds Hope is such a beautiful exploration of hope. And I had actually had some ideas about writing about hope, and then when I read your book, I thought, this is it. You know, you've so beautifully done it. And then we have Little Mole's Christmas Gift, which is about kindness and generosity. It makes me kind of want to ask the question, like, are we going to hear again from Little Mole? Is there another story that you can share with us? And I'd love to hear, Matthew, I know you're working on a few new things as well, and Tracy, so I don't know, maybe we could briefly share what you're working on next, and then we can look at the questions if anyone's put something in the comments.
I'm so excited that I get to talk about this. I didn't know you were going to touch on it. Yay! We have not seen the end of Little Mole.
Yay!
I know,
Yes.
I'm super excited. So yes, he's back in his new adventure coming 2022. It's called Little Mole Goes to School. So it's about his first day of school, and if you know our little mole, he's quite, you know, he's a nervous little chap, and so he's really worried because he doesn't know his ABCs, and he's not got big little.
I think we're frozen a second. So why don't we, Matthew, do you want to talk about what you're
I have to take a picture of her. She
This is the best. That's I love that Little Mole is coming back. That's awesome. I'll tell you, the project that has moved me, that I had the pleasure of working on, is we all know and love our dear friend Rachel Held Evans, and we lost Rachel last year in 2019, and one of the last ideas that Rachel offered her agent before she became sick was an idea for 2 children's books. And 3 or 4 months after Rachel passed, Dan, her husband, called me and asked if I would finish them. And I don't know if you all have known, if you all knew the year I've had. It was the most incredible gift to take her beautiful idea and hopefully bring it to life and do it justice. And it is. Can I give you just a little taste?
please?
It's called What is God Like? What is God like? That's a very big question. A question that people from places all around the world have wondered about since the beginning of time. And while nobody has seen all of God, because God is far too big for any of us to fully see, we can know what God is like. God is like an eagle, sharp-eyed and swift, with wings so wide you can play under their shadows. God is like a river, constant and life-giving. When you grow near God, you'll sprout up strong like a tree. God is like a shepherd, brave and good, a protector who loves her sheep so much that she watches over all of them and knows each of their names by heart.
Wow.
So it was a beautiful gift I told Dan that I was like, there's times when I felt like I was channeling her. And so to help that book or help that idea come to life, and it releases in May. And so that is that has been the project that I've had the honor of working on, and working on it during a really hard year when it has spoken to me and been life-giving to me. And I just cannot wait for people to experience it, because I feel like it's going to be life-giving for a lot of people.
So what did you have, Matthew? What did you have to work with? Like just the idea, or
I had basically I had that first little section. What is God like? God is, and I added a little bit to that. But then I had just 5 or 6 basic ideas, like God is like a shepherd, you know. And she had included, I think all in all it was like 175 words, and so it was the framework for the concept, and it what I love about it is that it's it really our friend Sarah Bessie read it, and she was like, it sounds like Rachel, and that's the greatest gift that anyone could say, because that's what I kind of wanted just to get out of the way and let her speak, and hopefully I did. So
yeah, I know you did. I think that becoming a mom was that was the direction her career was going, was towards all of this children's work. And she and I talked about that a little bit. And she wrote the foreword for Faithful Families right when her oldest son was just actually when she was pregnant with the baby, I think. I can't remember, somewhere in there. But it's like, that's such an awesome thing, Matthew. You're just the right person to do that. I can't wait to read it.
Can't wait. Yeah. Deborah, did we have any questions from the chat? I'm sorry, I was so taken with what Matthew was saying that I didn't look for questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, not so many questions, just lots of beautiful comments. So I think we're just enjoying hearing you four talk about your journeys. Tracy, did you want to talk about what you're working on next?
It's a secret when I'm working.
Oh, it's a secret. Okay.
No, I have so much stuff that I'm working on. It's like, I think that's one of the curses of writers, right? That we have so many projects that we're working on at the same time. So many things, I've debated whether or not to write about the atonement and try and tackle that with children, all of this harmful imagery about Jesus dying for our sins and what that does to kids, and trying to tackle Easter and all of that. And then I've also have some really personal projects about some of the stuff that I went through over the past couple of years. I've written about it a little bit and talked about it a little bit, but I actually, shortly after I moved, I had a couple of friends die, and just a lot of trauma in my life in addition to that. And I ended up having severe insomnia, and then having a psychotic break, and was hospitalized. And so that's way off brand for me, but it was a very spiritual experience. I learned a lot about God and about myself. And so that's another thing that I'm working on writing. So who knows what will be next. I think that's the thing about us as artists and writers, that we always have a lot have a lot of children's books in my brain too. And then also Prayers for Faithful Families is, because of the pandemic, there was a board book version of it that was supposed to come out next year, but I think is now delayed for another year or so. So who knows what's next? Lots of things. Did Glenys leave forever? Is she totally gone?
I'm right. I'm here.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see you. I was like, where did she go?
Don't talk bad about me. I'm right here.
No, I thought that I would. So when you froze, so Glenys, when you froze on my screen, at least you were like this.
Oh, no,
and I
was
tried
like
to take I just got my camera up and then it went away and I was like, oh, I wanted to send a picture of you.
So should we at least give Jennifer a chance to tell us what
Yes,
she's written?
yes. I was gonna
she's
say
like she has a book due tomorrow, and
the
so,
most accomplished person on this call and hasn't talked about herself at all.
Well, I do have a book due tomorrow that I've been working on this year. I signed the contract for it in early April, I think. So yeah, it's been born out of this time as well. But
you're talking about the book that you're writing right like today?
Mm-hmm. That I'm finishing today.
Yeah.
Or tomorrow morning at 5 in the morning. Yeah, that book is a book for adults, and it will be my 6th book for adults, and it's called Dimming the Day, Evening Meditations for Quiet Wonder. And the idea behind it was I actually wrote the proposal a couple of years ago, but it was about how so many of us experience anxiety and sleeplessness. And I ran into this really interesting set of researchers who wrote about the fact that when you experience wonder and awe, your anxiety can be alleviated. Normal anxiety, not, clinical. I'm not a psychologist, but there are ways that, when we're feeling anxious, by looking at something beautiful, by being out in nature, which I think we've all been taking advantage of over the last, year. You can kind of reframe and you can get perspective, you can breathe better. And so this book is a book of 20 reflections on things in nature that I find really awe-inspiring. And some of them are really simple, like dandelions, and some of them are really complicated. I told Tracy, like fractals, which I should never have written a chapter on, but I did. But they're all things that just kind of give information about these things, and then there's sort of a reflection about them. And the idea is that at the end of the day, instead of like doom scrolling through your phone, you can read this thing and learn something new about something in nature and just have a sense of calm. So it's meant to be sort of a soothing end of the day time to just reset. And so that, and the irony of writing that during the pandemic, of course, isn't lost, I hope, on anyone. But I've been trying to practice what I preach with it and really kind of dive into those topics. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I have some other children's books coming out in the next couple of years. And I want to say, just in closing, actually, just because we're a little over time, I just want to say with real deep gratitude to everybody on this call, both the people who spoke with us, but also so many familiar names and faces that I see of the people attending this. I feel like there's, in the world that we're in terms of like being progressive people of faith and really caring about introducing our children to the idea that God is love and loves them, and that they have a place and they have a role that they can play in building other people up and being kind and reaching out to others and making the world a better place. And I feel such an affinity with the other authors on this call, but also with those of you who are listening, because I know that that's your goal too. And it's been a very divisive and difficult year. And I just want to say I really appreciate everyone who is trying to be a loving parent, trying to be a loving neighbor, trying to be in whatever ways you can. I went to a really cool, and I won't ramble on this because we're over time, but I went to a really cool online conference, of course, a couple of months ago, and the keynote speaker was the poet Nikki Giovanni, and she was just wonderful. But one of the things she said was, we all have some little thing we can do, and it might seem really small. It might not be, writing a best-selling book or holding a big political, role in government or whatever, but these little things do matter. And so to those of you who are caring for someone right now because they need help during this time, or you're, a member of the clergy or whatever you're doing, just know that it does matter. And it is sort of like Glenys's little mole, we can all give our little pieces of mushroom to those around us. And it can seem really small, but the small things, if that's what you have, that's what I feel like I have to give in terms of my writing. I've got little small things I can do. And we all have small things we can do. So I hope that you won't feel discouraged, but you'll feel, in fact, encouraged hearing about these stories and hearing about what all of us are trying to do in our work, that you'll continue to do the good work that you have to do, and know that it is important. And even if no one sees it, or maybe you've been toiling on a book for a long time and so far you haven't found a place where it's going to be published, just keep following the good work that you can do. So I really appreciate you all, and I'm seeing these names popping up that that I know some of your stories. So thank you for taking time tonight and being with us, and I hope you'll find these books, Faithful Families for Advent and Christmas, Little Mole's Christmas Gift, and I think someone in the comments asked for this title again, All the Colors of Christmas by Matthew Paul Turner. And you'll love these books, and enjoy them and savor this season. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you, Matthew.
Everyone.
Glenys.
No,
Thank you so much for
everyone.
these heartwarming and inspiring words, and blessings to all of you all and your families this holiday season. Good night.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Night.